the reason why I make so many of the same videos over and over and over again, it's not that I think it's gonna change anything. But what it does is it keeps putting people that are involved in this program in a state of more illogicalness, which I'm okay with that. I don't want them to come up and become logical again. I want them to stoop to a level of no return. Because as they try to gaslight you into accepting these manipulations, what's happening with them is they're escaping reality, and then reality hits them, and then they come up with ways to kind of find ways to just make sense of it. Since day one, they've been trying to make me accept these pedophilia things as if it's me. Now, I know at this point, 100% sure that is what they make me experience. Everything I'm experiencing today when I look at kids, how I perceive children, is them manipulating me in these disturbing ways. With me specifically, when it comes to black little girls, they're like, no, it's you when you're a child, because then go back in my memories as a child and try to make me feel the same stimulation that I'm experiencing today. Now, this makes no sense in many ways, right? Because you're an adult man, so you're telling me that you're making me feel like a child again, right? That alone should explain everything. But their job is to break you down and lose sense of logic. That's why they like to use childlike individuals. It's better, actually, now that I look back at it, it's better that they use children. Because children, because of the fact they use children, children have a logic of children, right? So when do you hear these people that sound like children try to make you accept these things, it's better for this programming, because you're like, this child is this child being a, like, I don't want to use the word, but is it, you know, you're like, something's not right with this kid. But it's because they're trying to make you accept something that is falsified. They're trying to make you be something that you're not. And they want you to accept this logic that's that's nonsensical. So you're going to hear these things. They use scripts, right? Immediately when I put things in perspective, it's like, oh, they're going to rape you, they're going to torture you, it's you. Scripts. Of course, this tactics is textbook. For me, they're like, oh no, well, what you're experiencing today is what you experienced when you were a child, especially black little girls. Black little girls is here, remember? And then they'll bring some things before this happened. For example, I talked about in my first black girl video, something like that. I remember before August 19, 2019, which is the date they started manipulating my brain, I remember seeing a black man holding his little girl. He was like 2-3-year-old black little girl. It was very wholesome. But he said something. He looked at me, he's like, I know what you like. And I'm like, oh, at the time, I'm like, oh, I like this. Yes, I like to see a man, a black man especially, with his baby, his black little girl, being a father. That's always good to see. I like that. I thought that's what they were saying. But looking back now, what they're doing is they're trying to present this thing about pedophilia. The black little girls, as you see, like that sexually. Right? That's why you hear the noise campaign that's supposed to be like, oh my gosh, subscribe to this. Because they try to rewrite reality in this new version. And they're like, oh, we're going to win. Of course, my brain is going to go this way. But you have to understand that this is what they do. And then they talk about, but remember, when you're a child, you're going to see a picture that, like, remember the thing that you did to yourself as a child when you were just turning 14 years old, as a kid. I was like, yes, I know kids can do stupid things. I did something stupid. And I'm embarrassed to think about it now as an adult man, but I understand children can do things like that. It's impulsive. It's just that. I understand that. But they use this moment as, oh, but what you're experiencing today as an adult is what you do. It's what you experience. It's you. You used to feel like that when you're a kid. Remember what you did as an 8th grader? Like, yes, I know what kids can do. I know this way of thinking was not. I was not looking at a black little girl and get stimulation. I know that's what you guys make me experience. That's the nasty things that you can do to me. You can even manipulate my memories to experience that. Now, these people talking to me. Once you understand why they're making themselves illogical and why it's even more illogical, because not only they do this pedophilia type of torture, you're going to hear systematically, but you're going to hear the torture they have done to children. And so now what they're trying to do is like, they go even further. It's like, okay, because what's happening today, they give me stimulation, disturbing stimulation toward kids. Especially girls, especially little girls. And then black little girls, they then try to make you think that when you were like a child, like, remember what you did? It's like, I remember what I did, but I never experienced the stimulation. I will not see a black little girl and get stimulation. That's what you do to me. But they say, no, but okay, look, when you're younger, like 9 years old, 10 years old. They remember when I was in 3rd grade, so I'm like 9-ish. And it's like, remember when you saw the 7-year-old girl like that? When I was 9, the way I would look at a 7-year-old girl. And I remember when there was this kid that came to our house when I was in 3rd grade. And I remember seeing her kind of, giving look. It's like, that, yeah, we matched to that. Now, that they obviously have to dumb themselves down because they see this as some kind of war. It's not a war. My brain is being manipulated by these people. They just want me to be accepting of this manipulation because these entities actually have problem with pedophilia. So you don't look at them like, oh, but we matched to you when you're 9 years old in 3rd grade, remember? You remember when you were 9, you looked at a 7-year-old girl like that? Remember when you felt a little sensation when you're a 9-year-old boy? When you saw a 7-year-old girl? This is the things that they truly try to break you down. It's like, no, but you see, we saw this pattern, and then we sort of like, Jesus. Because the reality is this. These people have used systematically these patterns of manipulating people in these pedophilia ways. They've been using this pedophilia type of torture, and it's a pattern that they do this specifically, forcing people to get stimulation toward children. You're going to hear other testimonials that validate me. That they force you to experience these things. And so with me, they try to say, no, we had the patterns when you're 9 years old. You understand? And they like to use childlike people. Right now, there's like kids, almost like teenage or like something like that, like 14-year-old kid. It's like, oh, I'm 14. It's like, yeah, I know. You might be a 14-year-old involved in this, but I know who's in charge. Listen, they use the same scripts. And then to make you acceptive to this, are they going to rape you? They're going to torture you. They're going to do this. We're going to frame you. We're going to charge you. Things that are not logical, but just say, actually validating me more. Oh, we're going to frame you, so that's proof. And then they talk about me as a kid. Oh, die for what you did as a child. Listen to what they do to children. Yes, these people doing this thing to me. It's nasty. It's foul. But obviously, they do this pedophilia type of torture. It's not me. So when they do the black little girls in there and they try to make me subscribe to it, it's like, no, this is what you make me experience. They make me imagine a black little girl and give me stimulations. It's like, no, now you pay for what you did when you're in 8th grade, when you did whatever to yourself. Know what they're part of. Listen to what they do to kids. And it's not war. It's human experimentation. It's developing a technology that's been torturing men and women all around the world. And they use these childlike people that are going to do this repetitive scripts to try to disorient you and make you think in a disorienting way. And use childlike people because the logic of a child is what you have to accept this nasty manipulation and not see the obvious manipulation that has been consistent with others. And do not subscribe to the tonalities of the V2K when they try to talk to you. Because they try to, it's going to sound like, no, it's you, we want to just, no. These people are trash. And the entities that actually contract these people are filled with pedophiles. That's why I always bring that up. And that's why they like to use these childlike individuals that can escape. To see a grown man and woman try to be like, oh, like, it's just the worst. Because they're very logical and rational, smarter than me. And having to dumb themselves down. To all my target individuals, stay strong and know that justice will be done. But listen to what these trash are.
8 billion brains on the planet, potentially. Read them. Marines. Underwater.
How do you explain this is happening to Len? How do you rationalize?
Come in private. Hold on.
Okay, yeah.
Can I talk? Here's how I do my studies, and I wanted to find the commonalities, but I have to throw away the ones I'm uncertain about that are true targets. Maybe there's natural schizophrenia, there's a whole bunch of chemical imbalances, et cetera.
Right.
These weapons can actually induce and mimic all those diseases and effects. But the conversations, the scripts, they're called, are always the same. I've heard them all. They're slightly tailored for each individual, but they're scripts. And they're meant to confuse the very derogatory, That's just typical breakdown. If you ever been to boot camp, you're a worm until you're part of the team. And why would you want to break down the ego of that person? To rebuild it. So this gets into creating Manchurian candidates, split personality spies, and information couriers, people that will carry the V2K. So they'll say, we're the Russian government, we're the Chinese government, we're evil aliens, we're Satan's, satanic ritual abuse. And I've heard all the stories. One guy believed it was some 14-year-old kid with an Xbox that lived next door. The trickery really is that great when you're under hypnosis that people will believe something other than a massive government could do this. And so anyway, my interview with Len, he very well described a typical breakdown script that's used on almost all the TI victims. TI stands for targeted individuals. Some of them are pretty crazy. They have names like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and those are the confusion tactics. And when they're breaking down the ego of the human through all the pains and tortures and the verbal breakdown, these are typical CIA torture scripts. I mean, Kubark manual. And they do good cop, bad cop interrogation called Jeff and Mutt. And they go right through the list, right? Just textbook. So whoever the handlers are on the other side of this synthetic telepathy, they're following the handbook perfectly.
They're trying to take over my mind, putting thoughts of pedophiles. Like, it's disgusting. Take this whole thing into account so much and make it so dramatic. It is dramatic. It's somebody trying to end my life. It's somebody trying to end who I am as a person. It's somebody trying to take over my mind, putting thoughts of pedophiles. Like, this disgusting things. You saw where I was going with that first word. Disgusting things that I don't even want to talk about because it makes me sick. I don't even like those words in my mind. But it is what it is. So I have no choice now but to acknowledge that there are people in my surroundings or whatever they're doing. I don't know how they do it. I don't care. I don't know if it's through weapons. I don't know. I don't care.
I can be free from this torture. Every day has been a miracle of survival. I also experience what is referred to as malodorance. This is the alteration of the smell sensation so that I am often made to smell various things, including smoke, burning, dirty diaper, or baby powder, which they sometimes combine with the pedophilia type of torture, including the threat of planted dreams and videos in my closed eyes.
Realized that was impost, so I thought, look at this losers, don't know how to put me down, and they are doing this. So I told them that I know what you are trying to do, and I started laughing, and then I said again out loud, you'll never take my will, ASS, so just to show them that I meant what I said, I kept playing with my dog, and even though that attacks continue, I don't let them get me. Today they continue with the programming of perversion, but this time they are aiming in the use of people, better said young people, also children and homosexuals. When I aggravated them, I usually called demeaning names, and one of them is referring to homosexuals. For me, all of the slaves are misfits, society haters, scumbags, etc. No, I don't have anything personal against them, homosexuals, but as my way to aggravate the slaves, and since they love to use children for the torture and stalking, street theater etc. Especially teenagers for the stalking at close range with an attitude, they are using them during my sleep in the perversion program, and so you can imagine what the slaves of torture are pretending to do to me. In the last days, as today September 9th, 07, anything I do, either watching TV or reading of whatever I'm doing, they brush me sort of say, I feel like I'm aroused all day and I feel the palpitations in my genitals for what I'm thinking, and since the attack comes so quickly, I realized my programming has been set on auto in their central computers. No handlers could do something like this that quick. What make me realized, the slaves are desperate to get me. Unfortunately for them, they are facing a strong wall where no matter how much their computers EAP me, I know I'm not changing. As I said, I feel like they've been set up a beam where I feel constantly stimulated. I'm talking sexually, like a heat in my genitalia, like getting aroused constantly, trying to make me feel uncomfortable, because it doesn't stop.
The targets were forced to perform homosexual acts on each other against their will and religion in order not to be beaten or killed. This is a common breakdown tactic of belief systems and the human will. In no-touch torture, the techniques are more psychologically specialized for each target. Most common examples include homosexual targets that are forced with voices that are derogatory to their lifestyle and similar mental images. Almost all targets are forced to view child pornography in their minds. And vice versa is true, that heterosexual targets are forced to view homosexual sexual acts like in the
client who has autism. And she was the most significantly affected of all my clients and bodies of anyone around me, anywhere in the world, which I often see highly disturbing pornographic images and videos, including highly disturbing pedophilia type of images and videos when I close.
Able to impose any information on the brain of a person, presumably by some kind of waves, which in the mind take the form of voices, thoughts and images and imagination. In addition to this kind of implanting information that they need, they manipulate the psyche so that the information is written into your memory. Then by stimulating the certain regions in the brain, they can retrieve this information and present it as your own memory. This is the conclusion that can be made judging by the influence they have been making on me with their psychotronic weapons, for example artificial thoughts, imagination, and mental torture.
Any part of the body. This technology can be used to sexually manipulate the target. It can make the target feel sexual arousal, or it can sort of turn off the
I was told I was going to be shot in the face. And it was an older guy. He was like really, really disgruntled and pissed off. Yeah, you're going to get shot in the face. You know, sound like an angry ass old person. You know, then a couple of days later, a female said the same thing. Don't get shot in the face. You know, stupid shit like that. But what I really noticed is with the voices go, it's a bunch of females. You know, and I'm like, bro, really? You're not a woman. What real woman would stalk another female or sit back and allow that to go on? You really think?
Education. I live in El Dorado Hills, California, with my wife of 14 years, Lorna, and our 5 children. Nicole is 15, Patricia 14, Christopher 13, Dylan 9, and Avery 16 months old. Not only have I been going through this, but my entire family has suffered right by my side. We have all experienced the same type of harassment on different levels. We have all suffered the same symptoms while this harassment was going on. Some of our physical symptoms include severe tooth decay and vision loss, unexplained rashes and burns, severe headaches, mood swings, anxiety, thyroid problems, high blood pressure, heart problems, vision loss and cancer. Two of my children were born premature, which I attribute to this. Our son Dylan, now age 9, was born very premature. He was born at 31 weeks. During her pregnancy with Dylan, we were being targeted more so than other times. At the delivery, there were weird men walking and waiting around the hospital. Right outside our delivery room window, there was a white cargo van parked with 2 suspicious men inside. They were there the entire labor, a delivery. Our son had to be transported to another hospital 45 minutes away. When arriving to the Toa hospital, those same men and van were present. Three of my children have severe rashes that have not been explained by several doctors. These rashes have been present for several years at a time. If interested, I will gladly furnish you with detailed photos of the rashes. Our infant daughter, at 3 weeks old, was diagnosed with Lerner's syndrome. This was after a severe rash appeared on her body after a few days of torture. We were told by a couple doctors to take her home and love her and spend the rest of the time we have with her. They told us she would ultimately die from this syndrome. Thank God that Lerner's syndrome was not what affected our daughter. Doctors are still dumbfounded by her rash and symptoms. Sadly, we know
I am currently a speech-language pathologist working in private practice with young children. I had a 7-year-old client who has autism, and she was the most significantly affected of all of my clients. I eventually had to tell this client to go to another clinic, and they used her to threaten the most torture in me as well as their most extreme forms of torture. For several months, she would cry and scream horribly during our therapy sessions despite having a great day at school. This was highly unusual behavior for her, as she usually behaved very well during her therapy sessions and had been making incredible progress on all of her therapy goals. This was used to threaten extreme torture on me, making me scream and cry, etc. They would make the kids act out the kinds of torture that would later be done on me. For example, they would also sometimes make her bite her hand, threatening to make me bite my hands, as they often do. One day, she had a large, severe bite mark on her arm. She has also grabbed her crotch, saying, "Ow," and this was used to threaten me with severe sexual torture. One day, I also observed her gasping for air a few times in the same way that I do when I am being more severely suffocated. The suffocation had been in a mild state for a while up until this point. Many of their torture methods are cyclical in severity. Right after I saw this child being suffocated, then I began to experience very extreme suffocation all day, every day, for about 2 months straight, and that's also when they made it worse when I eat. Then I also work with a 4-year-old little girl with Down syndrome, as well as her 5-year-old sister who also has Down syndrome. I observed both of these girls suddenly grabbing their genitals in pain and verbalizing, "Ow." I observed this at least on 1 or 2 occasions for each of them during their separate sessions. During one session, I observed one of my 3-year-old clients suddenly grab his crotch and lean forward in his chair. And then he made a frightening grimace of severe pain. I asked him what was wrong and if he needed to use the restroom, but he said no to having to use the restroom and was not able to verbalize anything more due to his language delay. He looked puzzled and bewildered. Even though I had stated that it was time to do more work right before this incident, I quickly just let him play another game, and he quickly returned to his joyful, happy self again. In other sessions, he has also grabbed his crotch and said, "Ow," while looking up at me.
Oh, wow. That's the thing. The rest of the cases, they were sent back to the CIA to handle them internally. Where are you?
Well, don't worry, Stephen. I think a few of them were fired.
Yeah, well, the rest that's the thing. The rest of the cases, they were sent back to the CIA to handle them internally, whatever the hell that.
Where do you think you work?
CIA.
That must mean there is such a lack of fearing any sort of accountability. For crying out loud. While on assignment, 1,400? You must have not been doing any job.
Well, even if you had to look at it to make sure you knew what it was, don't you just need to look at one?
Right.
You're like, I better check the other 1,399
double-checking.
just to be safe.
Yes, I better
Each
check the other
file.
1,300 labeled tax things.
Unbelievable.
Oh my goodness.
And the guy with the 6-year-old?
Disgusting.
Twice.
Yeah, twice.
Twice with the 6-year-old.
So and here's the scariest part. Out of the 10 instances that are described in the report, only one person was ever charged with anything.
Yeah.
With anything. Comment below. Do you guys know this story? This should be catnip for the media, right? Think about it. You've got this lewd behavior. You've got corruption at the highest levels of government, right? Aaron Brockovich, something about fake tits and tap water.
Yeah.
The CIA raping children and sexually assaulting children, and they're not being prosecuted? Where are you?
Had sexual contact with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. He was simply fired. One employee purchased sexually explicit videos of young girls filmed by their mothers. He resigned. One employee estimated that he had viewed up to 1,400 sexually abusive images of children while on agency assignments. Not sure what actions, if any, were taken by him. One contractor arranged for sex with an undercover FBI agent. I think that you mentioned that. Posing as a child, he had his contract revoked. One CIA staffer was charged with child sexual crimes, and the employee was also under investigation for mishandling classified material. The CIA did not answer detailed questions, saying only that the agency takes all allegations of possible criminal misconduct committed by personnel seriously. So you're saying the reason why they didn't take this more seriously, why there weren't actual prosecutions that were carried out, is because what they were trying to not only protect their agency, but trying to protect the country from being compromised in some way by our foreign enemies who would use this information in some kind of bribery scheme?
I think that it's actually quite worse than that. In my personal opinion, my analysis based on this is that they know that we're already compromised, and they don't want to have to admit how compromised we are by these foreign adversaries, by these foreign intelligence agencies. They know we're compromised, and they don't want it all spilling out into court. So they'll go over to FBI, they'll go over to DOJ and say, hey, don't worry, we're taking care of this. Hey, don't worry, we'll take care of this guy. Don't worry about that. Don't ask any questions. We don't want those secrets coming out in court. We know the FBI does this. Time and again, just like in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where the FBI was able to testify off camera, completely in silent, and then their testimony was stricken from the record, so we couldn't even get a public review of what the transcript was, what the FBI testimony was in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because we know they were conducting surveillance of this entire thing. It's the exact same thing, and I was told behind the scenes in that case, they said we don't want our operations spilling out into court and people talking about it on YouTube. That's a direct quote.
Wow. Okay, here's more from this, and we'll finish this and then move on to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. But sexual crimes involving children, says BuzzFeed, including the viewing of images of abuse, have been uncovered at other agencies that handle sensitive information. In a November 2009 report, the Department of Defense acknowledged that dozens of Pentagon staff members or contractors had such images. In 2014, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community found that 2 officials from the National Reconnaissance Office, which oversees America's spy satellites, acknowledged viewing images of child sexual abuse during polygraph examinations. This is so disturbing. At a symposium in 2016, Daniel Payne, a top Pentagon security official, said that when workers' computers were examined, the amount of child porn I see is just unbelievable. Is this something that is happening for whatever reason with more frequency in our intelligence agencies, or is this something that is more pervasive in the general population than I originally realized? I mean, what's going on here? This is so bizarre. Remember, it's so evil.
Allie, we're told, and when I was put through recruitment into the intel community, you're put through polygraphs, you're put through a rigorous selection process. Why aren't these people weeded out? Why are so many pedophiles allowed to be given top-level security clearance? Remember, these aren't just people walking in off the street and saying, hey, can I get hired? Can I get a job? You're put through an extremely rigorous background check screening process. It's called an SSBI, single scope background investigation. There are people, they interview you, they interview your family, they interview your contacts, they go through your online footprint, they go through everything. So why is it that when they're going through these footprints, they're not checking, these digital footprints, they're not checking for so many pedophiles getting through their ranks. If it were up to me, you need to go into Congress, and Congress needs to launch a brand new church committee, number one, to talk about domestic surveillance operations, but number two, to ask the question, why are there so many pedophiles sitting behind